Hi, Wendy Rodrigue here, visiting with you from the Hilliard Art Museum on the campus of the University of Louisiana at Lafayette during their exhibition, Sitting with George Rodrigue, an exhibition conceived of and installed by the Hilliard Art Museum. Very grateful to them for that. And here we have George's wonderful portrait of his dear friend, Pete Fountain. You probably know, George painted four Jazz Fest paintings for Jazz Fest that became Jazz Fest posters. Only three became posters. And Pete Fountain was the second one. He painted it late in 1995, actually over Christmas, because first he had painted Mahalia Jackson here, which is hanging next to this. And Mahalia Jackson was supposed to be the Jazz Fest poster for 1996, following George's very successful painting / poster of Louis Armstrong from 1995. And so what happened was George painted Mahalia Jackson, and then there was some sort of problem with her estate and Jazz Fest, and it got changed. And George said, this Jazz Fest was in a pickle, I will only do another painting for you if it can be my good friend, Pete Fountain. That's how that happened. Pete Fountain sat for George on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, because the day after Christmas was the deadline. They had 2 days. George painted nonstop for 48 hours. He painted this in our home in Lafayette, Louisiana, in Bendale Gardens, and in the back room there, if you ever went in the rec room. And he always said that of all his Jazz Fest paintings and posters, it was his favorite, because he got to spend that special time with his good friend, Pete Fountain. Now, what's interesting about this, too, is that Jazz Fest was not real happy with this painting. And one of the things that they did not like was Pete Fountain's face. And so for the actual poster, they went back in and superimposed Pete Fountain's face onto George's image. This is the real thing right here. This is the actual painting, which I think is really fantastic. But George was upset about that. Pete Fountain was upset about it. There wasn't a thing they could do, because they felt that made a better poster, and maybe they knew what they were doing, because it was certainly very successful and is a fabulous poster. But this is the real deal. What was wonderful is that this painting, as I can recall, was last on view during George's exhibition in 2008 at the New Orleans Museum of Art. And George and Pete were able to sign books together with this image in it. Another thing that happened as a result of this painting was that artists were very upset with George Rodrigue, and they actually picketed the gallery on Royal Street in its former location, which is across the street, much smaller from where it is today. And they were mad because George had done the poster the year before of Louis Armstrong. It was the most successful Jazz Fest poster in history. It sold out that first weekend, and so they felt they should have a chance, and it shouldn't be George doing that a second year in a row. It's pretty ironic today, because of course there are many artists who've done multiple Jazz Fest posters, but that's what happened. They picketed the gallery, and George was devastated that he would have offended the local art scene like this and the local artists. He didn't want to be that artist who took away their chance. And he told Jazz Fest that he would never do another Jazz Fest poster. He was really upset about the whole thing. First the Mahalia Jackson fiasco, and then this being picketed. And so what happens? They asked him, he said no, 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 and then it comes time for the millennium. And Hirt, who was also a friend of George's and collected his Blue Dog paintings, George loved that. He passed away in 1999, and his widow, Beverly, contacted George and asked him, please, would you please paint Al? That was a dream of his for the Millennium poster. And it was a request that George could not refuse. And so he made it, a trilogy, right? Louis Armstrong, which is unfortunately not here, but Pete Fountain and Hirt, 3 great jazz legends out there under the oaks. Unfortunately, the press slammed George for this, because they said, oh, George, you can't even come up with an original idea. All the paintings are designed the same. But that happened because, as you know, the Mahalia Jackson was not the same. it was completely different. And so when George had to quickly come up with another design and another plan, when this is not working out because of her estate, he chose to paint Pete Fountain in the same way that he had Louis Armstrong out beneath the oaks. And then, of course, when it came time to do the third one, the trilogy, which he really swore would be his last, it only made sense to do it the same way so that the three became very complementary as a set. A lot of history there, a lot of politics. But in the end, it resulted in some wonderful paintings and some really wonderful Jazz Fest posters that are very beloved to this day. It took me years to get George back to Jazz Fest. He wouldn't go. A lot of bad memories of it. And I'll never forget the last time we went. We were walking in and he said, "I'll give you 5 minutes." And we ended up sitting through the generosity of some dear friends backstage as Emmylou Harris played. And I whispered in his ear, "You ready to go?" We stayed till they closed the gates. It was awesome. It was awesome.